So hello, and gives me great pleasure to welcome Philip Bacon, who runs our Spain and Portugal and our offices, as well as heading up the valuation team. Philip, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Very well indeed, yes. Just moved house, but the chaos is nearly over.
I mean, the house chaos as opposed to the Corona chaos.
The house chaos, yeah. The Corona chaos is, well, I think it's day 40 or something like that here in Spain. We're all getting used to it in our own particular ways.
Every day seems like a month, though, unfortunately. So, just to get started, so this is a series of video podcasts, if you like, that we're starting, where what we're trying to do is we're just trying to get a good understanding from a local expert, somebody who's actually there on the ground, as to what is happening, as opposed to stuff that you could read in the papers or you know, the 4,000 emails I'm getting on a daily basis from people updating me with their COVID procedures, which is, you know, obviously very welcome. So where are we? So, you know, it's Thursday. What's the current situation in Spain as you see it? You know, full lockdown, everything closed. What's the situation as of right now? All closed, right?
As at the end of March, all hotels, all bars, all restaurants, and all retail outlets were closed, and they remain closed. There are some exceptions. Obviously, there are some hotels which are being used as hospitals, some hotels which are being used as temporary accommodation for essential workers. But the basic rule is that the entire Spanish tourism market is shut and remains shut, and nobody knows when it will open. And it will probably be one of the last industries to come back on stream.
Yeah.
And that's mainly because of obvious reasons to do with social distancing. What is interesting, though, is the way in which people are now dealing with that. Clearly, your hotel is closed. That's a very simple truth you have to deal with, and there are lots of consequences to the short-term issues of dealing with staff and dealing with cash flow and dealing with rental payments. But what is very interesting in the last few weeks is that because the nature of the market is one that is built upon the belief that one day this will end. You know, the official government slogan for the virus is "one day more, one day less." That's their slogan, and that's what's driving everybody on, knowing that one day it will come to an end. And what we're seeing is a lot of people getting ready for that, getting ready to deal with the fact that even if they said tomorrow, you know, guys, it's all over, it's all finished, back to business, we know that there will not be an immediate return to anything approaching what was in place before this happened. So now what you see is restaurants planning to separate tables, to put up screens where you pay or where you get your food, or between diners. All these things are being invented now because they know that there will be this transitional period, which will be, okay, you can go out, you can do certain things, but these rules are still in place. And so be careful. You know? And I think all countries are having to deal with this transition and trying to trade off between the fact that that may increase the incidence of the virus, but at the same time, people need to go back to work and you need to deal with the economic consequences. So Spain is no different from any other country in that sense. Perhaps the fact that probably 15% of GDP is tourism GDP, that has serious consequences for a country like Spain. But overall, I think that the situation is very similar all around the world.
Are they able to make any money at all? So I was talking to Robert in Singapore yesterday, and most of the restaurants, including hotel restaurants, seem to have morphed into kind of a sort of delivery, takeout kind of option. Is that similar in Spain? Are people managing to get any revenue?
Yes, indeed. And as you can understand, that is a perfectly normal reaction, in the sense that if you have the facilities to be able to provide food on a home delivery basis, then that's what many people have been doing. You know, whether it's a hotel, whether it's a restaurant,
Yep.
If you can do that safely, then it's just supply and demand. You know, the demand for home delivery food has gone through the roof, and there are people who are taking advantage of that opportunity, which is quite right. So that's a positive thing for some people, obviously not for everybody.
So, what is the government providing, both from a sort of from a corporate point of view, business point of view, and then in terms of a staff point of view? How is it? What have they created for the market? How are they supporting it, and how is that being received?
That's quite difficult. The government is not necessarily in the best place to make unilateral decisions about anything, and that's a function of the way in which Spain is constructed as a political entity, with the very significant influence of the autonomous regions, and the fact that the government itself doesn't enjoy the same sort of majority that the Conservatives do in the UK.
Yeah.
So it's a careful path that they need to tread in order to get things done, in order to get support, because they do really require quite a lot of support from entities that may not be 100% behind them.
Yeah.
So the politics there are tricky. That's an understatement. It's very difficult. So there is a lot of criticism, which is understandable. Hindsight is a wonderful thing, and people will criticize, but I get the feeling that people are criticizing more in order to gain political capital.
But are they underwriting loans in the way that they've said in the UK? Are there any specific?
There's a range of support, okay, which has been announced by what is fundamentally a socialist government.
Yep.
So you can understand that there's a great deal of support for helping people in times of crisis, and for helping the most vulnerable. So yes, there are many schemes that are out there in order to help people ease the burden. In terms of the moratorium on mortgage payments or rental payments, in terms of supporting employee payments, whereby both employed people and self-employed people, similar to the way it works in the UK, there are mechanisms whereby you can get part of your income paid through state funding.
If you're retained as a member of staff, so it's kind of
yes, obviously, if you're subject to one of these furlough schemes, whereby essentially it's a deal that you do with the individual employer, and say, okay, fine, some of it you pay, some of it we pay. So that's that's a fairly common measure that you should expect, I suppose, in a situation like this, and it's applicable here. So there are always questions as to whether it's enough, and there's a lot of lobbying going on, as you can understand, especially within the tourism industry, which, as I said, is likely to be the one that recovers last. It's because it's so much more complicated to deal with tourism because of social distancing. Because by definition, that activity involves being very close to people.
Spain had an enormous youth unemployment problem a few years ago. Had that been slowly recovering as things have picked up over the last 2 or 3 years?
Indeed, yeah. Spain, as you said, had a very significant unemployment problem. I think it was up to 27% unemployment, and that over the last few years has been generally improving. So it's been coming down to more manageable levels. Now, obviously, there's a significant unemployment issue, and this is what's interesting is that the things that the market cannot do at the moment, which is principally retail, non-food retail, bars and restaurants, hotels, are the employers of a younger generation. So it's just like a double hit. So the work that the younger generation does in millions is to work in those environments.
Yep.
They cannot do that now because it's closed. And the people who funded those businesses can't go out and spend the money. So they're saving that money. Actually, if you think about it, they're saving that money that they would otherwise spend on those things. But that money is not necessarily going to those people who were employed by those businesses. And that's the redistribution of wealth issue that the governments are dealing with.
Okay, so this is an addition to segment. Of course, the beauty of doing this kind of video podcast is that when things change, and as at the moment they're changing very, very quickly. Of course, everything we did before, a lot of the stuff we did before was updated. So I've got Philip back on the line now because the scenario has shifted in Spain, and we now have some kind of plan. So what we're going to do is we're going to record a quick segment now, and Philip will update us on what's happened since our last call a week or so ago. So Philip, thank you very much for coming back. What's new?
Well, as you say, this is just an opportunity to update everybody on the current situation, which happened as of yesterday or the weekend, broadly speaking. Like a lot of other countries, we're dealing with this transitional period of going back to the famous new normal. And there's been announcements made this weekend about now what the plan is for the whole of the Spanish territory, which as we all know, it's a large and complex country, and therefore has to be dealt with in an appropriate way.
Yeah.
Because you cannot make decisions about the Canary Islands that are going to affect in the same way Bilbao. You know, it's just not going to happen. So what we've seen is a fairly comprehensive program, a transitional phased program that is driven by a number of essentially health and safety criteria. Now that we've seen a genuine decline in the incidence of contagion and death, so everybody's hopeful that this is where we are now past the peak, which has been the hope for everybody. And the evidence would seem to suggest that, there's no doubt about it. And so now we're moving into this phase process that has a timetable attached to it, a theoretical one, which lasts from now until the end of June. But that's contingent on the different parts of Spain meeting those criteria to be able to pass from one phase to the next. But what we've seen is a presentation from the government that says, this is what we want to happen. This is what we think will happen. There are 4 phases, phase 0, phase 1, 2, and 3. There are certain limited parts of the country that have been moved straight to phase 1.
Okay.
But that is very limited. That's limited to a few islands in the Canary Islands and the island of Formentera, which is the Balearic Islands. So these are very small, low population islands where really and truly, because they depend so much on tourism, it makes a lot of sense to push things forward a bit more quickly. But for the rest of the territory, we're now officially, as of the 4th of May, we are in phase 0.
Okay.
So what does that mean? That means that there's some more personal liberty is what it means. And you see that. You just go outside in the morning and you see all these people who've never jogged before, madly jogging, looking very out of breath because they just spent 40-something.
It's not the time to be getting a heart attack, one would imagine.
No. I do worry about some of the people that I see who clearly should not be jogging. But there you are. That's what you can do. Personal exercise on an individual basis. You can't go jogging with a friend. That's not allowed. And it's very clearly defined. This is one interesting thing about the way in which Spain can work is that the rules are very clear. You can go jogging between 6 and 10 in the morning and between 8 and 11 at night.
Okay.
And that's it. You know, maximum an hour, maximum 1 kilometer from where you live. So what they're doing is they're taking the whole day and spreading it around the different segments and the people who need to be protected. So more elderly people, there's a period of time during the day when they are allowed out, if you like. And that's where they would take their own walks and exercise. Children, another group, they have a period of time when you can go out now. A parent can take out to up to 3 children. Just to take the air. It's a lovely day. The weather's great here. It's 30 degrees. So it's a good time to be outside. And that's, that's where we are. So that's from a personal point of view, the liberties have changed somewhat. From a business point of view, as of now, as of phase 0, what you're seeing is small businesses that really cannot exist by home working, which is still the basic rule. The basic rule is if you can work at home, work at home. But if you run a hairdresser or some other small retail outlet, it's physically impossible for you to do your work. And therefore, you're allowed to open, but with very strict controls. There has to be an appointment made. You have to have the right things in place, shields and gloves and masks, all the things you would expect. But you can at least go and have your hair cut. I mean, that's something that's, again, it's driven by getting the economy back on its feet. And then, so this phasing is just, as I said, there are 4 phases, and that eventually leads to, theoretically, by the end of June, a time when you can travel across provincial borders.
Okay,
so up until now, you can only...
Phase zero is May.
Phase zero is theoretically this week.
Oh, this week. Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah, so phase 1, theoretically, phase 1 starts on the 11th of May.
Okay.
Okay. If all the criteria are met. And the total phasing lasts until the 25th of June.
Interesting.
When theoretically, from a travel point of view, you will be able to go across provincial borders. So, for example, the issue that many people in Spain have a second home. As from, I think it is the 8th of June, theoretically, you can travel to your second home if it's in the same province where you live.
Yeah.
But if it's not, so if you live in Madrid and your house is in Marbella, then you can't go. So it's this very, very gradual process whereby people are allowed to travel more further afield in order to try and slowly bring business back on stream. But the restrictions are still quite serious from a hospitality point of view. When eventually you can open your restaurant or your terrace, initially it will be only for takeaway food. You won't be able to stay there. You can go and get it and take it away again. And even then, if you are allowed to sit down, then you're limited to 30% of the total available seats. So this is still something that will take some time from a hospitality point of view to get to any sort of viable business model, whereby I suspect a lot of people will simply not bother. Some people will. I'm sure there will be people who will do it. But in the end, business is business. And even if you can open your terrace and have 30% of people on, is it viable? You're still going to pay the staff costs. There's still going to be a lot of costs involved in getting your place ready and cleaned and keeping your staff at the right distance. It's complicated, but the effort is being made slowly to try and do something about it.
So
it's unsustainable to keep it as it is.
Is there a date now that hoteliers can say, okay, if all things being equal, we can open our hotel on X date in June? Is it that concrete?
Well, yes, theoretically a hotel can open as of phase 1, but the problem is that you can't allow people to use their common areas. So you can allow someone to go and stay in a hotel, but you can't go to the bar, you can't go to the restaurant.
Okay.
So it's something. It's something. It's not perhaps what everybody wants, but I think that the truth is that we have to combine this quite sensible desire to make sure that we don't end up with another growth in the incidence of the virus, at the same time as dealing with the fact that there are many people who simply don't want to travel. They don't want to go out because they're concerned. So your total demand has changed. So part of it's controlled, and part of it is simply people's unwillingness to go out to a restaurant because they feel unsafe. So these are the great imponderables. Nobody really knows how it will respond. But at least this transition is happening, which is good news for some people. At least they have a reason to get back to work. But again, It's
Well, it's a plan, though, isn't it? Which I think is huge and is not to be underestimated.
well, yes. I mean, it's one of my great sayings. I bore people with it all the time. You know, planning is everything. The plan is nothing. You have to have a plan. You can change your plan every day if you want to, but you have to have one, because otherwise you're facing simple, we don't know, and wait and see, and that's no way to run any business or indeed to run any country, in my opinion. But people need to be tolerant enough to understand that these are plans and they may change, because we don't know what's going to happen. And you see in the media, you see the results of the latest change, and obviously the media tends to exaggerate things a little bit sometimes because it makes good TV. But because the weather's been so good and you allow people out like that, you see the images on the TV and it looks like perfectly normal day, with people walking up and down by the beach, and you know it doesn't look as if it's subject to any particular restriction, except for the fact that the majority of people are wearing a face mask.
Wow,
that's the thing that you notice that is different. Other than that, it's just people out for a walk or a run.
Okay, well, fantastic. Well, listen, why don't we catch up again in a couple of weeks' time and see how the plan is progressing? Because I think obviously it's going to be super, super interesting to see whether owners and operators are going to take advantage of that, whether they think the risk of relapse is too great for them to risk investing in opening, and what that's going to mean for the summer, and hopefully it doesn't lead to a second wave of infection.
Yes. No, I agree. I think that now that we've just started, we'll see how it goes to see whether or not the timescale makes any sense at all. And I'm sure that the individual property owners and business owners are now making those assessments, and they're working out, is it worth to make a plan now to open when we can, or are we going to wait and see a bit longer? And again, it will depend on the type of business that they have, like we said before. But at least there's movement. There's some evolution going on now, and we're all learning the lesson of this phased approach.
Okay,
well, it's a real resetting of the industry.
That's fantastic. We've run really long, so let's leave it there. What I would want to do for next time is to get your thoughts on what the industry is going to look like once we emerge from this, in terms of trends and what's going to happen, because I think that's also fascinating, because I think things are going to change, and that's probably its own talk anyway. So listen, thank you very, very much. That's amazing. Let's go back, revisit this in a couple of weeks' time, and do an update.
Okay. Thank you, Jeremy. Take care. Stay well.